So what is the exact purpose of interceptor? So interceptor, as in the name suggests, it intercepts the request. So the purpose, it actually follows expected oriented programming, right? The core of it, which is to implement some sort of behavior which are without changing the initial code, something like that, right? So I will show you what I mean by that. So as you can see that this is our client, right? It sends an HTTP request. So interceptor intercepts this request, and here you can modify whatever you want to modify. Now you would be saying that this is also done by the middleware, right? That is true indeed. But interceptor does not only intercept the request, it also intercepts the response which controller sends back. So intercepts is the only component which behaves in two ways. It intercepts the request as well as it intercepts the response, which is the main functionality of this particular component. So the responsibilities, or I can say the possibilities of interceptor, are like to implement some sort of logic before or after a function, before or after a route handler, to implement some sort of extension or extend a function to override the entire response, or maybe to transform the result. So most of the times you would maybe prefer to use middleware on the request and interceptor on the response, depending upon how you choose to do the things in your own way. But interceptor can be used for multiple purposes. For example, you are calculating some sort of payment, right? And you have defined a unit. Now, if a person is in Canada, then the interceptor would receive the response and change the currency back to Canadian currency or to the US currency and stuff like that. So, in just like we studied in guard, we have the scopes of interceptor as well, which is global, controller, and method. The request first goes to the global interceptor, then it goes to the controller interceptor, and then it goes to the route handler interceptor. So the topic of the scope remains same wherever it comes from in all of these components. So how do we implement interceptor? It is pretty simple. You have to implement a class which is Nest interceptor class. Just like we studied in previously, we implemented something in middleware as well as in guard. Similar to that, we implement Nest interceptor here. So as we saw in guard, we had context of execution context that we have here as well. So neither guard nor interceptor is jump like middleware, because middleware is the only component which does not have this access to this context variable. But the new cool part is this next part, right? So in very simple scenario, I can say that whatever you write before this return statement goes before the request is reached, and this next dot handle is after the response is about to be sent. So I will show you further with the example and logging, like what do I mean by that in practical demonstration. So let's move ahead in our practical demo. Okay, so let's try and implement our interceptor in our code. So as you can see that I have made one small change. I have commented this guard out because it was getting in the way. So in order to implement our interceptor, let's use the GLI nest generate and interceptor and then user, and then wait for it to create an interceptor for the user. It will generate all sort of the boilerplate code for us to start working. So let's go to source user and wait a second until it generates the code. Okay, so it is done generating. As you can see that it has created two files, user.interceptor.ts and then user.interceptor.spec.ts. This is for testing purpose. So we have our main file here. So this is similar code that I showed you earlier. Let's hit save so that it doesn't complain, change the end of the line file. So the red thing goes away. Now let's try and make sure that how does this actually work. So in order to even if whenever you create guard middleware, whatever you create, you have to make sure that it is actually in place either of a controller or a route handler or global. So let's try and implement it in our controller here. So go to the top, import it here, like this, and then import this use interceptor decorator and then paste it here. So what I did here is I imported this file, then I imported use interceptor from NestJS common, and then I used it as a decorator on this controller. So this interceptor is now applied to the entire controller of the user. Let's hit save, wait for the application to restart, and then try and log here as well. Console log user interceptor request. So not request, just user interceptor, not here, here. Okay, so whatever code I write here, it is being intercepted when the request is being sent. Okay, and whatever the code I write in this return statement, that code is going to be intercepted for the response. So this is for the request and this is for the response, and this response is in the form of observable. Don't worry if you don't know much about observable. It is some sort of concept and an entire, you would need to do a deep study if you want to get deep into it. But this, you need to understand that the response here is being caught in the form of an observable. So you might be using some sort of observable methods that we will see for a while. Other than that, we have this execution context that we study a bit in pieces and guards. So context, I will repeat again if you have not watched that video. Context give you access to whatever the context is, So I told you earlier that in the context you have get type, right? And in this get type you have, for example, HTTP request, which we are currently handling with, or you can have a separate other protocols like, for example, GPRC or WebSocket, or maybe you implement socket IO, stuff like that. So execution context gives you access to those contexts as well. Other than that, context also helps you understand like which class this request is going for, which handler this request is going for. So you have the access to the entire context, so you can play much better for whatever you want to do. Maybe you want to implement some sort of interceptor logic for a certain controller's route handler, but not for all handler. So you would make your if else logic here and then make your changes like this. So that is the real magic of the context. But we are not like dealing with context in deep because that is not the scope of the video. So let's try and check towards our request and response part of the interceptor. So let's try and hit our request here for the user. Let's try and just get the users for now. So the action returns all users, and I should have a user interceptor request log here. So let's try and play a little bit about how to modify or intercept the request, make changes, and how to modify and make changes on the response. Let's try and work with or play with the request part. So if I do something like this, so I told you about the different contexts. So let the context to switch to HTTP and then get this particular response. You can get other stuff as well, like get next, get request, get response. Let's move with get request and then console log this out, or maybe you also have access to body header or stuff like that. We did some of this kind of thing in guards as well, so it is similar to how you catch the request in the guards as well as how you catch the request in interceptor. So I have saved this. Let's try and hit this part, and you see you got the entire log of the request. So it is the process of accessing request is pretty much similar to how you access the request in the cards. So there's not much difference over there. You can get access to each and everything in the request that is coming to your Nest.js controller. So now let's move forward towards this handle part of the response. But before that, let's try and send some object in our get request. So get user this, go to the find all, and then try something like this, and hit save. Change the file to lf. Okay, so now we have id and name. Okay, and then what we have to do is in the find all we have to return this. So why is this red? Okay, so okay, keep it red for now. We have not implemented create or update. So if I go and hit send now, yeah, I get this particular object because now I'm not sending a string, I am sending an object. Let's try and intercept this response and play a little bit with it. Okay, so now let's try and make some changes with our response. So for that, let's put dot here and then use this pipe method. And here, let's just not do data directly. Try and use map from the RxJS and then do something like this. Hit save. So what I want to do, I want to return this, that is okay. Let's make some changes here. Yeah, let's see if it works like this. Okay, so the application should be restarted now, and then hit send and see if we got access to the response. Yeah, so we have this user interceptor response now. So you see, first we intercepted the request from here on, and then we intercepted the response from here on, and then this is the data. So if you want, you can make any sort of change to your data. For example, let mod const modified data is equals to data.map, something like this. Or do you we have a name, right? Okay, so let's hit this. Let's log this as well, and then try sending it. See, now the names are in capital letter. So you can see that we achieved something which is aspect oriented programming. Like we did not touch the core functionality which is in services or controllers. Rather, we changed the behavior without even modifying the internal or the core code. So this is how you play with request, and this is how you play with the response in the in interceptors. So I guess explanation was pretty much clear. So other than that, one thing that you would know obviously is from the guards. Right now what we did is we implemented the user interceptor here. What you can do is, if you don't want to implement it to the entire controller, you can cut paste in for this particular handler if you want. We discuss this in our guards as well. Similar to that, how you use pipes, you can use interceptor for only one route handler if you want to do that, but right now we are using interceptor for the entire controller. So other than that, you can also implement the interceptor globally. So to implement globally, I have come back to this main file, as you would know, and just like we implemented global pipes, global guards, and this is the global middleware. Similar to that, you can implement global interceptor like this, and then you would be using this and then implement it like this. I don't want to do that, so I'm commenting this out here as well. So I guess that was the entire topic about interceptor. This is just like a brief introduction to how the interceptors work. Obviously, you can have as complex logic as you want to implement here to change the behavior of how the route handler works either before or after its execution. So that was all. Thank you for watching.